Look, I'm thrilled to be here today with my colleague, Colin McNulty, who is a history teacher here at Wellington College and a resident expert in the First World War. He's written books about the experiences of Wellington College during the First World War. And as we come up to ANZAC Day, we're going to have a conversation with him as we reflect on what that means for our school. Now, before I pass over to Colin, we need to think a little bit about the fact that, war has cast a long shadow over Wellington College, and that old boys serving and dying in wars have spanned 3 centuries. The college's memorial plaques are inscribed with the names of old boys who served and those who were killed in the Boer War, World War I, World War II, and even Afghanistan. For most, they are just names, and reading them now no longer invokes a memory or an emotion as it once did. However, we must never forget that they too walked the corridors of the school, jostling one another, talking about upcoming events, playing on the school grounds at lunchtimes, and on Saturdays they sat in classrooms learning French vocab, mathematics, and the difference between a verb and an adverb. So each ANZAC Day we stop to make a time to remember them, our fellow students, and to hope that what they experienced will only be learned about and booked by the current and future generations of Coal boys. So, like I said, I'm here with Colin, and I'm going to ask him a few questions. We're going to have a conversation. So, Colin, you've researched and written about Wellington College's experiences of World War I. You've led battlefield trips to Europe on numerous occasions, and you've made an enormous contribution to our understanding of how the war impacted on our school. And you're now even writing a book about the history of rugby at Wellington College. But today I'd like to ask you a few questions. So, from your perspective, how has the First World War impacted on Wellington College, and why does it continue to resonate with us today?
Kia ora, Andrew. Yeah, thanks very much for asking me to do this. Yeah, I'm very interested in the role that the First World War has had on Wellington College. I certainly, every time I used to teach it in Year 9, I used to always make the point that I would argue that it was the single most significant event in Wellington College's history. Now, that's a big call. But I think the evidence, like all historians, we should sort of look at the evidence. I think if you look at the school magazines of the time, the Wellingtonians, etc., you see how profound the impact the war had. I think the numbers just tell you. Of course, one of our great headmasters, JP Firth, in that time, 2,300 boys went through the school. And of that 2,300 boys, nearly 1,700 fought in the First World War. So even from a numbers point of view, it's clear that the war had a profound impact. And then you add in the number of people killed, 223 old boys killed, an extra 400 wounded. And remember, for many of these people, this wasn't just a sort of a nick on the arm. This was losing a leg, a limb, and in many ways ruining their entire life. And, one of the most tragic things I feel from my point of view is when you're looking at the records, how young these young men are, how, so like the students we have today. And really, from my point of view, so at the time it was perceived as significant, and I think it still is significant today. I think many of the things we do, like ANZAC assemblies, as you've mentioned, the memorials, scholarships we have, like there's the Oscar and Victor Gallie scholarship, which is still awarded to the students. That emanates from the war. And of course, the trips we've done, as you've mentioned there.
And you're right that the war does resonate through the corridors of Wellington College, and it does continue to do so. And lots of that is in the way that you've, alongside people like Rob Anderson and others, have helped us to remember the stories of those individuals through the research that you've done for your book, A Brotherhood So Splendid, and the other work that you've done. As we go into remembering ANZAC Day, would you mind sharing with us maybe a story or two about the experiences of Wellington College students during the First World War?
Yeah, my book was predicated really on exploring the experiences of a particular rugby team, the 1909 First 15. And I chose them because that was the year that had the greatest impact that the war had the greatest impact upon. I managed to find a picture of this team, 1909, and I managed to research every single individual and sort of trace their war experience. Right, there are 17 young men in that picture, and 16 of them, I can say for certain, fought in the First World War. Of that 16, 4 were killed, 4 won medals for bravery, 4 were injured. And then, when you look at just those 14 people, and I think quite often you can look at large numbers. Do you remember we went to the battlefields on the Western Front? We look at these huge cemeteries, but when you reduce everything down, I think just to a small group, I think it's then that the profundity of the impact is more evident.
There is always a danger when remembering war that we risk glorifying it. So how do you see the role of remembrance, and how does it contribute to this community, the Wellington College community?
Well, I think in some ways there are parallels between, not immediate exact parallels, but parallels between the COVID crisis at the moment. It's an appeal, you know, and I think she's doing a brilliant job, Jacinda Ardern, and she's making an appeal to patriotism. She's suggesting that we're a community of 4.5, 5 million, and that we must do this for ourselves. And I often think of the 1909 First 15, that when they went to war, why do they go? Remember, they were all volunteers. There's only volunteers in New Zealand up until we come to mid-1916, when maybe the reality of war was becoming more evident. So therefore, when they went to war, they went at the behest of our society. Our society asked them to go. Our society told them it was the right thing they were doing. Now, we can debate whether it was a legitimate war, etc., etc., but we certainly asked them. So in the first instance, in terms of commemorating, my view is, well, we owe them a debt of gratitude that these young men, you know, had their lives ahead of them. And you know about Alex McColl, you know about Frisky, and some of these would have had great potential in their later life, and yet they lost that potential because their society asked them to do something. Now, you'll remember people like Frisky Fitchett and Hammy Grace and McColl and so many others. They certainly had a very strong bond with the school. And I often feel that they'd be very, very pleased, you know, if one believes in an afterlife, if that we are remembering them. I think they'll feel their debt of gratitude has been, to some extent, been repaid.
It feels like a nice point to wrap this up. Yeah. I want to thank you for your time and for the contribution you've made to the school's understanding of the First World War. It's always a pleasure to talk to you about history, and I look forward to having another conversation with you again soon.
Indeed.
Thank you, Colin. And to the community, we look forward to seeing you too.
Indeed.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you,
Good day, everybody.